a lot of overlap with those same financial institutions, but we're going to expand with that same thematic of infrastructure, enterprise-based. It's served us well.
And what are your growth expectations this year? What revenue growth are you tracking this year? Will you be profitable this year?
So, we have been cash flow positive the last couple of years. That has been a unique place in the market and allowed us to invest not only in the core of Ripple, but also in acquisitions. And even, recently you may have read, we did a tender offer to our shareholders. Yeah. We've now repurchased over $1 billion of stock from our shareholders. That's something that's important to us, quite frankly, because it is not an immediate term priority to go public. In the United States, trying to go public with a very hostile regulator that has to approve your S1, that doesn't sound like a lot of fun to me. Coinbase obviously had their S1 approved, and now the SEC is suing them for doing things that was outlined in their S1. Now, as I mentioned, there's a hearing tomorrow in the US about some of that, but I think it's indicative of why would we want to subject ourselves to an SEC that is openly hostile to this industry?
So in terms of an IPO, an exit of some sort, is that sort of parked to the side at this point?
Yeah,
or are you looking elsewhere outside the US for a listing?
Yes to all of those.
Okay.
I don't think about an IPO as an exit. I think about an IPO as a step in the journey. Shareholder liquidity is important to me. We have investors that first invested in Ripple in 2012. So they've been in this deal for 11 and a half years. And so we want to provide that liquidity, which is one of the reasons why we've done these tender offers and now repurchased just over $1 billion of stock. We have looked at other jurisdictions that have clearer rules of the road. But honestly, a lot of people go public because they need to raise capital.
Yeah.
Ripple's not really in a place where we need to raise capital. And so it is not a short-term priority. We're obviously keeping that option open, and we'll evaluate it as time continues. And we'll evaluate it again as we have new regulators sitting at the United States SEC.
And I guess some of it's market dependent as well. Last year was an interesting space in the tech world more broadly. There were a lot of secondaries, buybacks, but very few IPOs. The market wasn't obviously very great for them. So I guess it's also how the broader markets play out as well.
For sure, that's part of it. And not just the public markets, but also the crypto markets. Yeah. And I think Coinbase's stock is in a much stronger position now than it was a year ago, but obviously well off its highs from 3 years ago when it went public. So it's just not a huge priority. We have a lot of capital, very strong balance sheet. We can continue to play offense through an acquisition point of view, invest in the business. As we started this conversation, I am very optimistic about the crypto market in 2024 because of those things around putting compliance first.
Right.
Making sure we focused on solving real problems for customers and not just the speculative cycle, I think will put the whole industry on a really good trajectory.
How do you think the retail investor feels? Because we know in previous cycles, more broadly, you get the initial bump up, sort of at the phase we're in now. And what takes it really to those all-time highs is the fever amongst the retail investors. Now, the last cycle was special. It was a very different crypto winter to one that we had seen before, characterized by a lot of bankruptcies, a lot of contagion, and then obviously the issues with FTX and Binance as well. Do you think the retail investor at this point may be a little bit more cautious this time around, this cycle, about dipping the toe back in?
I think probably yes, but look, one of the advantages is I've been around the block once or twice. I remember the earliest days of the internet as we know it, and the retail investor really drove the hype cycle of Internet 1.0, and I'm talking about 1999, 2000, and then you had a washout in 2001, 2002, and that was a painful, the dot-com crash. But today, when we sit here, some of the most valuable companies on the planet in Alphabet, Meta, these are companies that were born of that era. And so I think that what happens in the short term around crypto is, I take a very long view, and I encourage whether you're a retail investor or an institutional investor, I think if you take a long-term view about where these markets are going and why there's so much momentum despite the self-inflicted wounds. Again, as you and I talked backstage, Bitcoin's not that far from its all-time high right now.
Yeah.
And I'm very optimistic about what we're going to see this year.
Brad, just as we wrap up, I was walking down the promenade yesterday, and crypto has been displaced by AI as the cool kid on the block. How do you feel about that?
I'm thrilled.
You're thrilled. Why?
Look, I think that
It's good that crypto's boring now, right?
I don't know if I go that far. Look, I think every new technology goes through a hype cycle. I think AI is also a technology here to stay, transformational in a lot of ways, but also not exactly clear what the business models are, how it's going to play out. And I think that's where crypto was a few years ago. And I think now we're further along, and I think that's a very positive thing for the crypto industry. I'm excited about what's going on in AI. I'm a voyeur, not a participant in that world, but it's going to be interesting.
Brad, always a pleasure to speak to you. That was a whirlwind tour.